Hello learners, welcome back to another session of Learning and Development in Organization. We have started the module 10 where we were discussing about the diagnostic approaches for learning and development. Specifically, we started with technology. Today, we'll look into the new skills and behaviors. Many a time we see that individuals come into the organization, they come with a fresh perspective, they come with a new skill set, maybe a set of skills or aptitude, and the way they perform might be slightly or in fact largely different from the existing workforce. Then we conduct a need analysis for the people who are there already existing, how we can actually bring them up to speed, or maybe we look into the people who have just walked in, how effectively they can be tuned into the organization specifically. So all these aspects will be deciphered or will be understood or realized by a training need analysis or the need analysis. So typically we have discussed in length and breadth about need analysis in the previous module, but what are the new skills and behaviors that are required in the present day working conditions? What are the existing skills? What are the new skills? What are the behavioral competencies that are warranted for today's job? Let's have a discussion on that. I'm Dr. Cyril Issac. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Business, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. So when you talk about the new skills and behaviors, ladies and gentlemen, please note, skill gaps aren't problems. They are opportunities for growth and innovation. It's something like in problems, in disaster, in chaos, you have to look into the opportunities where you can grow. So skill gaps aren't problems. They are just opportunities for growth and innovation. So this will be the underlying theme for us to understand more about the new behavioral competencies that are required. So let's have a quick recap of what we did in terms of the diagnostic approaches in the previous module. We looked into the training need analysis typically, where we identified the gaps between current and the desired performance. Please do understand our discussions or recollect our discussions with respect to the TDRs, the task, duties and responsibilities a particular job warrants, and what are the KSAs, the knowledge, skills and abilities an individual brings into the table. So all these aspects, if they are matching, it is well and good. Most probably in organizations, people tend to have a deficit, a lacunae somewhere between there will be a mismatch. So all this typically has been discussed in the need analysis aspect. So training need analysis is vital. We also look into the performance gap analysis. What is the discrepancy? It evaluates the discrepancies in individual or what is the team's output relative to some expected standards. The performance, what you actually see is here, what you expect is here, the gap is significant. So many a time, many organizations tend to take this as a serious concern and they work on it. The organization thrives. But many a time there are instances where the organizations try to oversee it, try to ignore it at their own peril. Another significant aspect which we discussed was the capability assessments, how you are typically assessing the individual capability and the group capability focuses on evaluating the current competencies, what you are, what is your skill set at the moment and how it can be improved against the organization's strategic future requirements and needs. That is another aspect which we discussed. Another significant aspect was organizations need assessment. It aligns mainly with the learning needs with the broader organizational requirements and the transformation agenda altogether. So where you want to take the organization, many a time 5-year plan, 10-year plan, where you want to see yourself, what is the position you want to fix your organization for, maybe after some couple of years, that is specifically obtained by organizational needs assessment. So it is not only the training need assessment or need analysis that you do on an individual basis, but also the organizational need assessment that will make or clarify a map of you going from here to here with respect to the organization. Let's look into the evolving aspects that comes from training needs to capability development in greater detail. When you are looking into the typical training needs and how it has emerged over the period towards capacity development, towards capability development, organizations are shifting from fixing what's broken to enabling what's next. So you look into the diagnostic approaches now, it helps shape capability development strategies that are continuous, that are future oriented and tightly linked to business outcomes. So this evolution marks the transformation of learning and development from a service provider to a strategic partner perspective. If I have to explicitly state, I will make use of the words of Burson 2021. Capability development is the new training. Capability development is the new training. It prepares people not just for their current role, but for tomorrow's challenges. So, capability development is the new training. Now let's look into the typical aspects of why focus on new skills and behavior. The moment we think of focusing on new skills and behavior, this question comes to our mind. It emphasizes the forces reshaping the world of work that make new skills and behaviors essential. So we can talk about digital transformation, the technology adoption, AI, automation, data analytics. It all demands digital fluency. It demands systems thinking. It demands data-driven decision making. So every employee, from frontline staff to senior leadership, needs to embrace technology adaptability. The second important aspect would be the hybrid and remote work. It requires skills such as, say, virtual collaboration, digital communication, or even self-leadership and remote team engagement. So when you're talking about collaboration, it is different from virtual collaboration specifically. So please do understand behavioral expectations shift from presence-based to mainly outcome-based or outcome-focused accountability. So this is what we see generally in hybrid/remote work conditions. When you look into the continuous reskilling, upskilling and reskilling, always use upskilling and reskilling together. Shorter skill lifespans, they require a growth mindset, they require a learning agility and resilience. So employees must be open to reinventing themselves and continuously evolving. Other significant aspect would be the strategic role of learning and development. Learning and development is no longer about one-off training programs. It now drives enterprise agility. It drives, if you ask me, talent mobility. It drives employee engagement. So new skills and behaviors are critical levers to support change management, to support innovation and organizational performance. So if I have to borrow the words of World Economic Forum 2023, I would say the half-life of skills is now less than 5 years. Learning and development must help employees reinvent themselves every 3 to 5 years. So if you are having a new skill set, if you are having a new ability, maybe learned, maybe something that you have derived, please do not rest on the past laurels. Half-life of skills is now less than 5 years. So every 3 to 5 years you need to keep updating yourself, because the half-life of skills is now less than 5 years. When we look into the evolving workplace and learning and development response towards that, I would list down with macro trends taking the first slot. Macro trends driving the change. We look into different aspects. The modern workplace there is no doubt, is undergoing seismic transformation, if I can use a word, driven by the global technological and demographic shifts. So these trends typically influence the capabilities employees need and thus require learning and development functions to recalibrate their strategy. So we look into the AI, artificial intelligence, the automation part, the datafication of work part. We see that repetitive, mundane or routine tasks that are increasingly getting automated. AI tools augment this decision making and operational process. So employees need data literacy, they need AI awareness, they need AI fluency, to be honest. So when you are looking into AI awareness, AI fluency and human machine collaboration skills, I would say that what World Economic Forum stated in 2023, by 2025 and 26, analytical thinking, creativity and flexibility will among the most in-demand skills, and that's what we are seeing right now. Analytical thinking, creativity and flexibility are undoubtedly among the most in-demand skills presently. Then we look into the personalized learning demands. When we talk about the personalized learning demands, employees expect learning to be tailored to their roles, career goals and learning preferences. So this demand is rising, especially among digital native generations who value customized on-demand content. So modern learners are impatient, they are self-directed, and I would say they are overwhelmed because L&D, learning and development, must meet them where they are. This is what is critical. Other significant aspects include agile organizations and real-time learning. Organizations are becoming flatter, they are less hierarchical and are more agile and robust these days. So this requires just-in-time learning and is relevant, is rapid and is responsive. So 3 R's which I would say is important is being relevant, being rapid and being responsive. So static competency frameworks are being replaced with dynamic skill taxonomies. So this is what we understand with respect to the agile organizations and real-time learning. We have to be relevant, rapid and responsive. Now we look into the generational workforce diversity. When you talk about the generational workforce diversity, today's workforce spans 4 to 5 generations. It has from baby boomers to Gen Z. So each group has different digital fluency levels. Each group has different work values and ethics, if you think about it. And even each group has different learning preferences, necessitating multimodal learning and development approaches. So generational differences are not a problem to solve, but a design input for inclusive learning ecosystems. So this is what we should talk about in case of generational workforce diversity. Now let's move into the evolving workplace and L&D response in a way that we have to have a must shift from to. So we take it as 3 different categories: event-based training, one-size-fits-all design and transactional training, and from that where we go to. So in light of these macro trends that we have discussed, the role and function of L&D must definitely evolve. So this transformation is not merely tactical, it is long time, it is strategic, it is cultural. So when you are looking into from event-based training to continuous learning culture, L&D must foster learning as an ongoing process embedded in the daily work. Learning ecosystem should include formal, informal and experiential elements totally. When we are seeing the drift or from the change from one-size-fits-all design to data-driven personalization, we have to have use of learning analytics, skill assessments and adaptive platforms to deliver what individuals need when they need it. So AI can curate learning journeys based on individual performance and behavior. When we talk about the shift from transactional training to strategic capability partner, L&D is not just a service function. It must partner with business leaders to drive strategic workforce planning, talent development and organizational change. So these are some of the happening shifts in terms of workplace evolution and the learning and development response towards that. Now let's look into the key diagnostic challenge. The critical diagnostic shift required in L&D is undoubtedly understanding the future capability needs instead of simply current performance gaps. So the traditional approach, what we call it as the TNA, diagnostic tools, often focus on what skills are being not there or are missing right now. So the modern need is something like L&D must anticipate what capabilities will be needed tomorrow for roles that are evolving and for those that don't yet exist. So this means that engaging with business strategy, it means utilizing environmental scanning, it means adopting capability modeling and workforce planning tools, and it also means mapping skills, adjacency and career pathways. So strategic diagnostics begin with a future back mindset, not just what's broken, but what's becoming. Now let's look into the new skills required for learning and development diagnostics. So in an era where learning is increasingly integrated with business transformation, learning and development professionals are expected to move beyond the traditional training roles and take on the strategic positions that drive capability development. So this particular shift warrants or demands a new portfolio of skills, which is what we are more concerned today, particularly in diagnostics, to align learning strategies with organizational goals. So when you look into the portfolio of skills, it can have anything from data literacy, from agility, from the technology adaptation, all these aspects. Let's quickly look into them in detailed fashion. When we look into these skills, typically we'll start with the most important one, data literacy and analytical thinking. Please note, the ability to comprehend and utilize data effectively has become a cornerstone for learning and development diagnostics. So professionals must interpret a variety of data types, ranging from learning analytics and performance dashboards to engagement surveys and competency assessments. So these key competencies would essentially include using tools like skills matrix, 360-degree feedback mechanisms and AI-powered assessment platforms to identify the capability gaps altogether. So what we do is the analysis of learning behaviors, course completion rates, test scores and engagement metrics to uncover these insights or to diagnose a problem and opportunity. So these analytical skill enables the learning and development professionals to make evidence-based decisions, identify the trends that are happening and generate actionable insights. So according to the CIPD 2022, that is Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, we have already discussed the CIPD in the previous module. So according to the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development 2022, data literacy in learning and development is critical for driving learner-centric strategies and for demonstrating a return on learning investment. So this ROI part is vital when it comes to the learning outcome specifically. So Bersin 2021, as you can see, emphasizes that learning leaders must understand what skills are being used, where gaps exist, and how these gaps can affect organizational performance. So this is what typically we understand with respect to the data literacy and analytical thinking part. When we look into the consulting and business acumen part as the second new skill required for learning and development, typically this analytical skill or this modern learning and development practitioners are increasingly expected to act as internal consultants. So the moment we say consulting, this is what it pertains to. So this involves diagnosing root causes of performance issues rather than merely responding to requests for training. So consulting skills may include, conducting thorough need analysis by asking strategic questions, collaborating and partnering with senior stakeholders to align learning initiatives with organizational objectives. Furthermore, if you ask me, strong business acumen allows the learning and development professional to translate the learning needs into business outcomes. So frameworks like, please recollect the Phillips ROI model, are frequently used to evaluate the financial impact of learning programs and it support the resource allocation decisions. So according to specifically by 2017, effective learning and development professionals must understand the language of business, revenue, productivity, customer satisfaction to build credibility with leadership. This is what we understand with respect to the consulting and business acumen. Now we look into the futures thinking and workforce planning. Futures thinking involves anticipating long-term trends that will influence the workforce skills and capability requirements. So this skill is crucial for shifting from a reactive to a proactive learning and development approach. So typically the practices would include, scenario planning, conducting scenario planning and strategic workforce planning to anticipate the future learning needs. It will also have monitoring of mega trends such as sustainability, imperatives, technological disruptions. It could be something like the AI or blockchain. It can have a look into the demographic shifts to understand their implication for skills. So what the World Economic Forum 2023 notes that more than 50% of all employees will need reskilling by 2027 as adoption of technology increases. So I have already made a statement with respect to the half-life of the skills. So here again the World Economic Forum comes up with a statement with respect to the need for reskilling. So L&D professionals must understand these trends and develop strategies to future-proof the workforce. So according to CIPD 2022, integrating futures thinking into diagnostic process enables more robust capability planning and agility in learning design. Now let's look into the digital fluency part. Digital fluency refers to the ability to effectively navigate, evaluate and leverage the digital tools and platforms to enhance the learning process. So as the learning and development technology landscapes become increasingly complex, proficiency in systems like all the LMS, learning management systems, or learning experience platforms, LXPs. So LMS and LXPs and even some talent intelligent tools have become vital. So what are the applications that are relevant or the applications that are critical? Using AI-driven platforms to conduct personalized skill assessments and recommended learning paths, and also leveraging the data dashboards to track learner progress and course efficacy. So if I have to quote Clark and Mayer 2016, they argue that the understanding of instructional design principles for digital formats is critical to avoid passive consumption and to ensure meaningful learning outcomes. Even Bursin 2021 highlights that these learning and development professionals must typically understand how to implement technologies that offer real-time insights into learner engagement and competency development. Now let's quickly look into the fifth aspect, which is the agile learning design. Agility in learning diagnostic is all about using iterative, responsive approaches to identify and address the learning needs quickly and effectively. So this skill typically involves what we see as conducting frequent pulse checks, pulse diagnostics and rapid needs assessment. It also includes applying the design thinking to co-create the learning solutions with end users. So agile learning diagnostics favor continuous feedback, shorter learning cycles and quicker interventions, aligning with the pace of organizational change. So according to Gottfredson and Mosher 2012, you can see that agile learning enables learning in the flow of work, increasing both relevance and adoption. So Bursin 2021 also notes that L&D teams must operate in sprints, not semesters, to remain responsive and relevant. Now let's look into the behavioral competencies that are required for learning and development professionals. As the learning and development function evolves into strategic business partner, behavioral competencies become just as critical as the technical skills. So, these competencies shape how the learning and development professionals approach diagnostics, how they influence the stakeholders and drive the organizational learning cultures. So, when we look into these aspects, we can see some of the critical factors like curiosity and growth mindset. In a rapidly changing world of work, curiosity and growth mindset are vital, are essential for continuously evolving one's own practices. So, when we look into the learning and development professionals, they must be eager to explore new diagnostic tools, methodologies and emerging trends such as AI in skills mapping or real-time performance analytics. So, a growth mindset popularized by Carol Dweck, 2006, refers to the belief that abilities can be developed through dedication, through effort. So, this mindset fuels resilience and openness to feedback. It attributes for effective diagnostics. We see curiosity. It enables L&D professionals to ask deep exploratory questions, go beyond the surface level analysis and investigate organizational dynamics and learning culture. So, even if you take the input from LinkedIn Learning 2023 report, these learning and development leaders who demonstrate the curiosity and a willingness to reinvent their approaches are more likely to design interventions that are forward-looking and aligned with the future capability needs. When we are talking about the curiosity and growth mindset, we should not forget the empathy and emotional intelligence part. Please note, empathy and emotional intelligence are vital. They are central to understanding the human aspects of diagnostics. So, they allow the learning and development professionals to identify what we see as the learner motivators or learner stressors or needs beyond the technical skill gaps essentially. So, some of you would have already read the book Daniel Goleman's Model of Emotional Intelligence. It outlines self-awareness, it outlines self-regulation, it outlines empathy, motivation and social skills as key EI domains. So, his work in L&D context includes typically the ability to recognize learner disengagement due to emotional or psychological challenges, foster inclusive learning environments that value diversity in cognitive and cultural perspectives. It helps in build trusting relationships with learners and stakeholders to ensure openness during diagnostics. We look into emotional intelligence. It also supports the creation of psychologically safe spaces where learners can express concern and aspirations, crucial for effective needs assessment. We now look into the collaboration and influence part. Modern learning and development is inherently cross-functional. There is no doubt about it. We have already categorically established that. It requires collaboration with HR, operations, strategy, and all the successful business units. So, diagnostic excellence demands a collective intelligence approach, drawing insights from multiple stakeholders to shape interventions. So, effective learning and development professionals, they excel in interpersonal communication, conflict resolution, and the ability to influence without authority. If you look into the cases and Posner 2017 work, they highlight those leaders who enable others to act and inspire a shared vision are more likely to gain commitment across teams. Please note this. So, an insight highly applicable to all the diagnostic aspects or phases or people who are involved in the diagnostic phase of learning and development. So, collaboration typically, if you ask me, enhances shared ownership of outcomes and it strengthens leadership support for learning initiatives. Now, we move on to one of the most important quality or competency, resilience and adaptability. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please note, diagnostics in today's volatile world and work economics and work environments, they require professionals to navigate ambiguity. They require professionals to navigate time pressures and changing stakeholder expectations. So, resilience helps the learning and development professionals manage setbacks, while adaptability allows them to revise the diagnostic approaches when assumptions no longer hold good. So we see that agile methodologies like what was once common, Scrum, Kanban and design thinking provide structured yet flexible frameworks that support iterative diagnostics and rapid problem solving. McKinsey and Company 2022 notes that most future-ready organizations are those that embed adaptability as a core capability, so not just in operations but in talent development. Resilient learning and development professionals maintain focus and optimism despite evolving business priorities or inconclusive diagnostic data, ensuring that learning remains relevant and timely. Now let's look into the critical and systems thinking perspective. High impact diagnostics require the learning and development professionals to think beyond individual performance problems and consider organizational systems and interdependencies. So this includes the ability to analyze how culture, how let's say the leadership behaviors and how technology and structure dynamics influence the learning needs. They also do use a root cause analysis to differentiate between, let's say, symptoms like poor performance. Let's take an example. Poor performance and deeper issues or systemic issues, something like misaligned incentives. So if you look into Sanjay's 1990 work, concept of the learning organization emphasizes the importance of systems thinking in organizational learning. So when applied to diagnostics, systems thinking enables a holistic understanding of performance gaps and their underlying drivers. Moreover, critical thinking helps challenge assumptions, evaluate evidence objectively, and draw connections between seemingly unrelated data. So an essential skill in complex problem solving. Now let's look into the particular practice or what happens in the world of practice. Typically the case study of IBM's skill transformation journey. So as I mentioned, across the modules we take a number of case studies to give you a connection between the theoretical input that I am giving and how we can actually connect it with the real world scenarios that is happening in the world of practice. So in this particular case, it's about IBM's skill transformation journey. If you want to understand the context, by 2016 you can see that IBM realized that over 50% of its employees' skills would become obsolete within the next 3 to 5 years due to rapid shifts in client demands, specifically AI and cloud solutions, etc. So whatever were the traditional methods of the training need analysis and other aspects were too slow and generic to keep pace with these rapid changes. So IBM typically needed, if I can list down, rapidly identify future ready skills across the job families, enable a culture of continuous learning, and move from training delivery to proactive capability development. So the diagnostic approach, what we have discussed now and how it happened in IBM was, as a diagnostic approach, AI powered skill analysis was done. IBM deployed its internal AI platform, which we have already seen across the previous module, the Watson Career Coach. The Watson Career Coach to assess current skill levels, identify emerging skill needs, and provide personalized learning pathways. So it mapped almost, I think, 3,000 plus job roles and analyzed millions of data points from performance reviews, from resumes, from job postings and learning records. It also looked into the human-centered design workshops. Center design workshops, conducted design thinking workshop with business leaders, L&D teams and employees to validate the diagnostic insights and co-creating learning journeys. It used the empathy mapping and journey mapping. Empathy mapping and journey mapping tool to understand behavioral barriers of learning. So typically we had to understand this with respect to the possibility of human-centered design workshops. Then we made use of skills heat maps and future skill taxonomies. That is, it created skill heat maps for each department. Identified the critical skill gaps in areas like agile project management, let's say AI ethics, cloud native development and design thinking. So technically the new skills and behavior that was demonstrated can be tabulated something like this. For data literacy, we see that how it was applied at IBM was that L&D used AI dashboards to make informed capability decisions. In case of the strategic thinking, it shifted focus from course catalog to future job readiness typically. In case of systems thinking, it mapped connections between market trends and internal roles technically. In terms of empathy and design thinking, it conducted persona-based diagnostics to improve learner management and learner engagement. And with respect to collaboration, the company looked into the learning and development which worked cross-functionally with HR, with IT, with business heads, etc. So what was the typical outcome? What was the typical result? Over 90,000 employees, please note, over 90,000 employees reskilled in the areas of cloud and AI. So skill development rate increased by over 60% in a span of 2 years. So IBM launched a skills build platform, now also used externally to upskill the job seekers. And finally, it positioned L&D as a strategic enabler of business transformation. So what this typical case shows us is with respect to the ability of what the identification of new skills and the new behavioral competencies can do to the organization. So ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I would like to emphasize again on the aspect. In the previous session, we looked into technology. In this session, we categorically looked into the behavioral competencies, not now, but maybe in the future. So all these aspects typically will enhance the learning and development scenario within the organization. Please note, technology is enabling us, but we also need to have the behavioral competencies that are going to complement the technology part. So please note, when we are looking into learning and development as a vertical, we need the right mix of technology, and we also should be sure about what all typical behavioral competencies we are having, new skills we are having, so that we can adapt to the changing trends in the environment. When I'm talking about the environment, it is not only technological, it might be political, it might be economic, it might be social, all these aspects combined together. Thank you for listening to me patiently. We'll come up with more details of learning and development in the next class. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.